Welcome to the Rare History Channel. Legendary prisoners from Alcatraz. Top 8. Alcatraz Prison, located on an island in the San Francisco Bay, was known as one of the most secure and brutal federal prisons in the United States during its operation from 1934 to 1963. Many infamous criminals were incarcerated there, and we observe in this video 8 of the most interesting and legendary. Number 1. Al Capone. Al Capone, also known as Scarface, was one of the most notorious gangsters of the 20th century. He was sentenced to Alcatraz in 1934 for tax evasion and served 4 years there. During his time at Alcatraz, Capone was reportedly haunted by the ghost of one of his victims. Capone's time at Alcatraz was characterized by his declining health, and he was ultimately released from prison due to his deteriorating mental and physical state. Capone's time on the island was also marked by his unique living arrangements. He was housed in one of the prison's larger cells, which was furnished with a desk, radio, and other amenities not provided to other inmates. Despite this relative comfort, Capone's time at Alcatraz was anything but easy. Number 2. Robert Stroud. Robert Stroud, also known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, was a convicted murderer and a noted ornithologist. He was sentenced to life in prison for killing a prison guard and spent 17 years at Alcatraz. Despite his nickname, Stroud was not allowed to keep birds at Alcatraz. His interest in ornithology was not piqued until later in his incarceration, after he was transferred to Leavenworth Prison in Kansas. Stroud's fascination with birds was so intense that he authored 2 books on the subject while incarcerated. The first book, Diseases of Canaries, was written in 1933, while Stroud was still at Alcatraz. The second book, Stroud's Digest on the Diseases of Birds, was published in 1943, after Stroud had been transferred to Leavenworth. Stroud's passion for ornithology was not enough to secure his release from prison, however. He died in a medical facility in Missouri in 1963. Number 3. George Machine Gun Kelly. George Kelly was a notorious gangster and bootlegger during Prohibition. He was sentenced to Alcatraz in 1934 for kidnapping and served 17 years there. Kelly was reportedly one of the most difficult inmates to handle due to his violent behavior. He was also known for his attempts to escape from Alcatraz, which included digging a tunnel and trying to scale the prison walls. Despite these efforts, Kelly was never successful in escaping from the island. After his release from prison in 1951, Kelly lived quietly until his death in 1954. Number 4. James Whitey Bulger. James Bulger was a notorious gangster and leader of the Winter Hill Gang in Boston. He was sentenced to Alcatraz in 1959 for armed robbery and served 3 years there. After his release, Bulger went on to become one of the most wanted fugitives in the United States before being captured in 2011. Bulger's time at Alcatraz was relatively uneventful compared to his later criminal activities. He was known to be a model prisoner, and even taught some of his fellow inmates how to play the guitar. Number 5. Alvin "Creepy" Carrus. Alvin Carrus was a notorious gangster and member of the Barker-Karpus gang during the 1930s. He was sentenced to Alcatraz in 1936 for kidnapping and served 26 years there, making him the longest-serving inmate in Alcatraz's history. Carrus was known for his intelligence and his ability to organize complex criminal schemes. He also had a talent for writing, and published an autobiography in 1971 called The Alvin Carrus Story. Carrus was eventually released from prison in 1969 and deported to Canada, where he lived until his death in 1979. Number 6. Roy Gardner. Roy Gardner was a notorious train robber and escape artist during the 1920s and 1930s. He was sentenced to Alcatraz in 1934 for kidnapping and served 6 years there. During his time at Alcatraz, Gardner made several attempts to escape, including one attempt where he disguised himself as a prison guard and walked out of the prison with a group of other guards. Gardner's most famous escape attempt came in 1936, when he and 2 other inmates used a makeshift ladder to climb over the prison walls and make their way down to the water's edge. Although the 3 men were initially successful in their escape, they were eventually recaptured and returned to Alcatraz. Number 7. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin were the masterminds behind one of the most famous prison escapes in American history. The 3 men, who were serving time for bank robbery, managed to escape from Alcatraz in 1962 using a homemade raft made of raincoats. Although their bodies were never found, it is widely believed that the men died during their escape attempt. The story of their escape was later dramatized in the film Escape from Alcatraz starring Clint Eastwood. Number 8. Henry Young. Henry Young was an inmate at Alcatraz who gained notoriety for his involvement in the infamous Alcatraz riot of 1946. Young was originally sent to Alcatraz in 1934 for stealing money from the U.S. Postal Service and served 17 years there before being released. However, in 1946, Young was brought back to Alcatraz after he was involved in a violent altercation with a prison guard at another facility. Young and several other inmates took part in the riot, which lasted for 3 days and resulted in significant damage to the prison. Young was eventually sentenced to life in prison and died in 1972. In conclusion, Alcatraz prison housed some of the most notorious criminals in American history. While some, like Al Capone, became famous for their crimes, others, like Robert Stroud, found fame in their unique interests and talents. Regardless of their individual stories, these criminals all served time on the infamous island prison, cementing their place in American criminal history.